Throughout history, entire civilizations have vanished overnight, leaving only chilling mysteries behind. Abandoned Viking villages in Greenland sit frozen in time, eerily empty with no sign of where their inhabitants fled. Powerful kingdoms disappeared beneath volcanic ash in a single devastating night, and mighty empires were suddenly obliterated by mysterious invaders known only as the Sea Peoples. These sudden events span continents and centuries, defying explanation and challenging our understanding of history. How could thriving societies simply vanish, leaving almost no clues behind? In this video, we're venturing deep into history's greatest mysteries, uncovering lost civilizations and the catastrophic events that erased them from existence. From strange disappearances to sudden collapses, we'll explore secrets buried for thousands of years, and what they might reveal about our own future. So wherever you are, sit back, get cozy, and relax. As always, the visuals are there for added context, but aren't necessary to enjoy the video. So whether you're watching closely or simply listening in the background, you're about to embark on a journey through history's most intriguing, vanished civilizations. Let's dive in. When most of us think about Vikings, images of fierce warriors, iconic long ships and horned helmets which they actually didn't wear, spring to mind. But beyond their legendary raids, the Vikings were also explorers, traders, and settlers who established thriving communities across vast regions from their Scandinavian homeland to the distant shores of North America. One of their most ambitious ventures took them westward to the remote and unforgiving landscapes of Greenland. The North settlement of Greenland began around 985 AD, led by the notorious explorer Eric the Red. Banished from Iceland after a series of conflicts, a very Viking way to start things off, Eric saw Greenland as a fresh start. His clever marketing, naming this harsh, icy place Greenland to attract settlers, worked surprisingly well. Hundreds soon arrived, building communities that eventually housed around 2,500 residents. For a while, things went well. Settlements grew steadily, with farms established, livestock raised, and hunting becoming a crucial part of survival. The Norse Greenlanders built two primary communities, the eastern settlement in the south and the smaller western settlement further north. Life wasn't easy, but the settlers adapted well, crafting tools from local materials, constructing robust stone houses, and hunting seals and walrus for food and trade goods. But by the 14th century, something strange happened. The vibrant Norse settlements started going quiet. By around 1450 AD, the once thriving Greenland communities were mysteriously deserted. Houses stood empty, tools and possessions left behind as if their owners intended to return, yet they never did. Historians and archaeologists have long puzzled over this sudden disappearance. Theories abound, but three explanations stand out as most credible: climate change, resource depletion, and social unrest. First, climate change. Starting around the early 1300s, Europe entered what's known as the Little Ice Age, a long period of colder temperatures that drastically affected agriculture and survival. Greenland, already a harsh environment, became even more hostile. Winters grew longer, summers shorter, and ice blocked vital sailing routes. Imagine endless winters with little daylight, frigid temperatures, and dwindling food supplies. Farming became almost impossible and livestock suffered. Visualize isolated communities staring anxiously out over frozen fjords, wondering when or if fresh supplies would ever arrive from Europe. With their usual food sources becoming scarce, the Norse Greenlanders turned increasingly to hunting marine mammals like walruses for food and ivory. But these resources weren't limitless. Intensive hunting slowly pushed animal populations further from shore, making these crucial hunts increasingly dangerous and less productive. Archaeologists have found evidence suggesting the Norse struggled to sustain their diet. And as food sources diminished, malnutrition and disease likely spread through the settlements. Resource depletion wasn't just about food. Timber, essential for building and repairing homes and ships, became scarce as local forests were depleted. Without ships, trade with Europe became nearly impossible, cutting off a vital lifeline. With supplies dwindling and isolation growing, life in Greenland became increasingly desperate. Then there's social unrest. When communities face extreme stress, social structures often collapse, leading to internal conflicts or abandonment. Archaeological evidence hints at increasing tensions among Greenlandic settlements as resources dwindled and conditions worsened. Perhaps the settlers chose to leave collectively, seeking better lives elsewhere. Or maybe, in the harsh winters, communities fractured under pressure, with small groups attempting risky voyages back to Europe or North America. While no written records confirm this theory explicitly, it's a credible possibility that human relationships and structures began breaking down under severe strain. Yet despite these plausible theories, definitive answers remain elusive. The disappearance of the Greenland Norse is still wrapped in mystery. The settlers left no explicit clues or records explaining their final fate. Just empty villages silently challenging archaeologists to piece together their story. Recently, intriguing archaeological discoveries have added another layer to this puzzle. Norse artifacts have been discovered far inland at sites like Newfoundland in Canada, providing compelling evidence that the Vikings explored deeper into North America than previously thought. Tools, fragments of metalwork, and even iron nails, unearthed at sites like Lono Meadows, hint that perhaps the Greenland settlers attempted to relocate further west, seeking new lands as their homes became unlivable. Could they have integrated into indigenous communities or founded undiscovered settlements elsewhere? The exact answer remains unclear, but these artifacts raise fascinating possibilities. Beyond the mysterious fate of Greenland's Vikings, similar vanishings happened across other North Sea Viking settlements. For example, communities along what is now England's eastern coast faced their own dramatic changes as sea levels rose during the medieval period. Entire villages were gradually submerged beneath the North Sea, with lands like Doggerland, an extensive region once inhabited, now hidden beneath the waves. Recent archaeological surveys have revealed submerged villages, streets, and even forests under the sea, painting a vivid picture of entire societies erased by rising waters. Imagine villagers forced to abandon their homes, step by step, retreating inland until their settlements vanished completely, swallowed by the ocean. This gradual yet inexorable environmental shift reshaped the very map of Northern Europe, leaving modern archaeologists to piece together clues from beneath the waves. All these events share a common thread: environmental pressures, human adaptation, and ultimately collapse. The Greenland North settlers, like their North Sea counterparts, faced conditions that steadily worsened until survival became impossible. In both cases, humans attempted to adapt, but eventually reached limits beyond which their societies couldn't survive. This leads us to a compelling question. Could the disappearance of these Viking communities serve as a warning for our own environmental future? Today we face challenges that echo those encountered by the Norse. Changing climates, rising seas, and depleted resources. Their story, silent but powerful, asks us to reflect on our own vulnerabilities. Could we, despite our advanced technology and knowledge, someday face similar pressures forcing dramatic societal changes? The Norse civilization's disappearance in Greenland remains one of history's most captivating and cautionary tales. While archaeology and science continue to uncover clues, the mystery endures, reminding us how fragile even thriving societies can become under relentless environmental pressures. But from freezing Greenland, let's travel to tropical Indonesia, where a single day changed history forever. When you think of Indonesia today, images of vibrant islands, stunning beaches, and lush tropical forests probably come to mind. But back in the early 1800s, Indonesia was also home to a prosperous, relatively unknown kingdom nestled at the foot of Mount Tambora on the island of Samboa. The Tambora Kingdom was a thriving society, enjoying fertile lands, abundant agriculture, and active trade routes. The population numbered in the tens of thousands, building a vibrant culture fueled by their fertile volcanic soils. Little did they know, however, that the very volcano providing this fertility would soon become their downfall. Mount Tambora was always there, an imposing presence known to locals, but generally considered safe. For centuries, it remained dormant, quietly watching over the kingdom. Then, in early April of 1815, the mountain stirred from its slumber. Small tremors began rippling through the surrounding villages. At first, these tremors were nothing more than curiosities, minor events that drew little attention, but soon things took a dark turn. On April 10th, Mount Tambora erupted violently, releasing a catastrophic explosion unlike anything the region had ever experienced. Picture this: an enormous cloud of ash shooting miles into the sky. A thunderous roar heard thousands of miles away, and rivers of molten rock cascading down the mountain's slopes, destroying everything in their path. Within hours, entire villages were wiped off the map. Homes, crops, livestock, and thousands of people vanished beneath a relentless torrent of ash and lava. The Kingdom of Tambora simply ceased to exist overnight. Eyewitness accounts gathered from distant survivors and later explorers described terrifying scenes. Dense clouds of volcanic ash turned day into night, plunging the region into complete darkness. Hot gases and ash rushed down the mountain, obliterating nearby settlements instantly. Those further away faced suffocating air and poisonous rain. Desperate villagers fleeing to higher ground or desperately clinging to whatever shelter they could find. Yet the eruption didn't just affect Tambora or even Indonesia, it shook the entire world. Here's something you probably didn't learn in history class. The Tambora eruption in 1815 was the largest volcanic event recorded in human history, rating a staggering 7 on the Volcanic Explosivity Index. To put that in perspective, it was about 100 times more powerful than Mount St. Helens's famous eruption in 1980, the sheer amount of ash and gases thrown into the atmosphere had global implications as ash clouds spread around the world. They dimmed sunlight and lowered global temperatures, creating what became known as the year without a summer in 1816. Imagine your entire year's plans carneled, not by a pandemic or a stock market crash, but by one angry volcano halfway around the world. Crops across Europe and North America failed miserably, causing widespread hunger, economic disruption, and even snow in midsummer. In New England, frosts occurred in July and August, destroying vital harvests. Farmers and villagers thousands of miles from Indonesia suddenly found themselves facing famine, migration, and social upheaval. In fact, the eerie climate changes triggered by Tamba indirectly inspired the writing of some iconic literature. Mary Shelley famously spent that gloomy summer cooped up, indoors with friends, composing her chilling masterpiece Frankenstein, influenced by the bizarre weather and unsettling atmosphere caused by Tambora's distant eruption. Who knew an Indonesian volcano could indirectly birth one of the world's most legendary horror stories? Back on Sumbawa, the devastation was total. When European explorers reached the area months later, they discovered a surreal and haunting landscape. Where villages and lush jungles once stood, now stretched barren fields of ash, volcanic rock, and silence. The once tall Mount Tambora had lost roughly a third of its height. Blown apart by the eruption, what was left was a vast, lifeless caldera, a massive crater that remains clearly visible even today. The Tambora civilization remained hidden beneath layers of volcanic ash for nearly 2 centuries, quietly waiting to be rediscovered. It wasn't until recent archaeological excavations began that clues about their daily lives finally resurfaced. Excavations revealed pottery, tools, and human remains, each item offering a fascinating glimpse into this once thriving kingdom abruptly frozen in time. As archaeologists carefully brushed away the volcanic ash, they uncovered homes and community structures remarkably well preserved beneath the surface. Inside, they found detailed pottery pieces, beautifully carved tools, and elegant jewelry. Clear evidence that Tamba wasn't just surviving, they were prospering. They had mastered agriculture on volcanic soils with trade networks stretching far beyond their local area. Perhaps most striking were the scenes of everyday life halted mid-action. Cooking pots stood abandoned beside hearths. Tools lay scattered next to unfinished projects, and footprints remained etched in ash, tracing frantic attempts to escape the eruption. These poignant discoveries painted vivid mental pictures of an ordinary day turned disastrous, instantly transporting us back to that fateful moment. Today, Mount Tambora looms quietly once again, its dramatic past temporarily at rest. Modern-day scientists keep a watchful eye on the volcano, knowing its potential, but hoping its destructive power remains dormant. Meanwhile, archaeologists continue to study the ruins, each find enriching our understanding of the civilization lost beneath the volcano. Beyond the immediate devastation in Indonesia, the eruption's ripple effect stretched across the globe, causing the infamous year without a summer. In Europe and North America, crops failed unexpectedly, leading to widespread hunger and confusion. Strangely enough, the gloomy weather-inspired writers, including Mary Shelley, who penned her classic novel Frankenstein during this unnaturally cold year. Who would have thought that a distant Indonesian volcano could indirectly give birth to one of literature's most iconic monsters? In the end, the Tambora kingdom wasn't just erased. It was buried in a matter of hours beneath layers of volcanic debris. Could something similar happen again elsewhere, just as suddenly? From fiery Indonesia, let's journey now to North America, where another impressive civilization mysteriously vanished from what was once a bustling metropolis. Imagine standing in a sprawling city bigger than medieval London at its peak. Streets bustling, traders shouting from markets, and the steady hum of thousands of people living side by side. Surprisingly, this isn't Europe or Asia. It's right in the heart of what we now call North America. Around 1050 CE, Cahokia thrived along the Mississippi River near modern-day St. Louis. Home to a sophisticated Mississippian civilization, it was the largest settlement north of Mexico for centuries. Yet today, Cahokia is known mainly as an archaeological site with earthen mounds quietly hinting at its once grand past. So how did such a thriving metropolis vanish without a trace? At its peak, Cahokia housed an estimated 20,000 people, enormous for North America at the time. To give you a sense of scale, it dwarfed contemporary European cities like Paris and London in population and complexity. Its residents lived in organized neighborhoods surrounding giant central plazas. Towering above the cityscape was Monk's Mound, an impressive earthen pyramid covering over 14 acres. Imagine stacking several football fields together that served as the city's ceremonial heart. Archaeologists believe this enormous mound supported the home of Cahokia's chief and elite members of society, marking their authority literally above the rest. The city wasn't just impressive in size, it was carefully planned too. Streets radiated outward in a grid-like pattern, residential zones neatly organized around public spaces. Defensive wooden walls or palisades enclosed key sections of the city, likely offering protection and clearly defining boundaries. Nearby fields produced abundant crops, sustaining the population through sophisticated agricultural practices like maize, cultivation, beans, and squash. Known collectively as the Three Sisters farming method, Cahokia was without question an advanced urban center whose residents mastered the complexities of urban planning, agriculture, and political structure. But then something strange happened. Around 1300 CE, Cahokia started to decline rapidly, and by the late 14th century, the city was abandoned entirely. The bustling streets fell silent, and the majestic mounds slowly faded into obscurity, covered in grass and forgotten by history. Unlike volcanic eruptions or invasions by mysterious outsiders, Cahokia's disappearance was quieter yet equally puzzling. Historians and archaeologists have debated for decades about exactly what caused this collapse. Three major theories typically emerge: flooding and environmental disaster, resource exhaustion, and political or social instability. But what evidence supports these ideas? First, let's look at flooding. Cahokia sat close to the Mississippi River, providing rich soil and convenient water transport. However, being near such a powerful river had its downsides. Archaeological evidence shows layers of sediment deposited by major floods, particularly toward the city's later years. Imagine living in a city repeatedly submerged by floods, your crops destroyed, homes damaged, and resources stretched thin. Over time, residents might have simply had enough, gradually moving away rather than continually rebuilding. Repeated flooding could have discouraged the population, eroded their livelihoods, and pushed Cahokia into a slow but inevitable decline. Next up is resource exhaustion. Cahokia, with its huge population and extensive agriculture, required massive amounts of resources to sustain daily life. Forests were cleared to build homes, palisades, and tools, eventually causing shortages in essential materials like timber and game animals. This environmental stress likely affected crop yields, too, making it harder each year to support the large community. Think about how frustrating it would be. Your farmland slowly losing fertility, hunting grounds becoming empty, and the woods disappearing around you. Gradually, the quality of life would decline, forcing residents to seek more abundant lands elsewhere. Political instability is another compelling theory. Maintaining a large population in a highly structured society takes effective leadership. If disputes arose among ruling elites, or if the population became disillusioned with their leaders, societal cohesion would fracture. Some evidence points to increased fortifications and defensive structures appearing around this period, suggesting potential internal conflicts or external threats. Visualize the tension. City leaders struggling to maintain authority, rival groups clashing over limited resources, and people quietly slipping away in search of stability elsewhere. Such political tensions could have accelerated Cahokia's decline, making it nearly impossible to sustain the city's complex social structure. Interestingly, Cahokia also left behind mysterious signs of unrest. Archaeologists discovered evidence of defensive stades rebuilt multiple times, implying that the city faced repeated threats. Who or what were they defending against?
Other Mississippian
communities, internal revolts, or unknown adversaries remain subjects of credible speculation. These defensive preparations suggest Cahokia was a city on edge, uncertain of its future, and increasingly vulnerable to external and internal pressures. Perhaps the most surprising aspect of Cahokia's story is how quietly it disappeared. Unlike the sudden volcanic eruption that buried Tambora, or the violent collapse caused by the Sea Peoples, Cahokia faded gradually. Residents didn't vanish overnight, but steadily abandoned their city over decades, eventually leaving it empty and forgotten. The result, however, is equally mysterious: a once thriving city reduced to grassy hills and archaeological puzzles. A fascinating fact often overlooked is that when European explorers reached this area centuries later, they hardly recognized the ancient mounds as human-built. They assumed these were natural landforms or dismissed them as insignificant. Only much later did historians and archaeologists realize the sheer scale of Cahokia, understanding that it was not only bigger but also more sophisticated than many medieval European towns at its height. Now, here's an interesting rhetorical question to ponder. Does nature or human politics pose a greater threat to civilization? In Cahokia's case, it's difficult to separate environmental challenges from societal conflicts. Likely a combination of flooding, resource depletion, and political unrest collectively weakened this impressive city, leading to its gradual abandonment. Still, the exact balance of these factors remains uncertain, leaving plenty of room for ongoing speculation. Today, Cahokia is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and researchers continue to uncover clues about its past. New excavations frequently yield fresh insights about how its people lived, worked, and eventually left their great city behind. Recent studies have uncovered previously unknown neighborhoods, market areas, and even ceremonial burial sites, each adding depth to the city's fascinating story. While archaeological research will likely never fully resolve Cahokia's mystery, each discovery brings us closer to understanding the complexity of this remarkable civilization. It's a story that feels familiar and distant at the same time. A sophisticated urban society thriving on fertile riverbanks only to gradually vanish, leaving behind haunting earthen monuments and unanswered questions. Yet Cahokia wasn't the only place swallowed by water. Let's explore the lost lands beneath the North Sea. Today, when you look out over the North Sea from the coasts of Britain or Northern Europe, you're met with a wide expanse of water, fishing boats, cargo ships, and seabirds. But thousands of years ago, this view would have been completely different. Imagine a vast, lush landscape stretching as far as the eye can see, teeming with forests, grasslands, marshes, and rivers filled with fish. This was Doggerland, a rich, fertile territory connecting modern-day Britain to mainland Europe, inhabited by thousands of hunter-gatherers who thrived off the abundant wildlife and plentiful resources. Archaeologists refer to Doggerland as Europe's lost Eden, and it's easy to see why. The environment was ideal for human habitation, providing everything from ample fishing opportunities to large herds of deer and wild boar. Evidence discovered beneath the North Sea, such as flint arrowheads, bone harpoons, and remains of cooking fires, suggests the people living there enjoyed a comfortable existence. They hunted, fished, gathered wild fruits, and built temporary settlements as they followed animal migrations. Imagine small communities clustered around waterways where fresh fish and game were plentiful, and life, for the most part, was predictable and stable. But Doggerland's residents likely noticed that over time, their landscape was changing. At the end of the last ice age, around 10,000 years ago, melting glaciers caused sea levels to gradually rise. Initially, these changes were slow, allowing people to adapt and relocate settlements inland. However, what the inhabitants couldn't anticipate was a sudden and catastrophic event known today as the Stoga Slide, which would dramatically change their lives and their land forever. Around 6200 BC, far off the coast of what's now Norway, an immense underwater landslide occurred, sending a massive tsunami roaring across the North Sea. Geological studies have uncovered layers of sand and sediment deposited by this tsunami, clearly marking the scale of devastation. Based on these findings, researchers estimate that the tsunami wave reached heights up to 25 meters over 80 feet high as it slammed into Doggerland's coastline. To visualize this, imagine a wall of water as tall as a modern 8-story building suddenly sweeping inland, destroying everything in its path. The destruction caused by the Stoga tsunami would have been immediate and devastating. Villages built near the coastline and along rivers were instantly obliterated, along with entire populations who had no warning and nowhere to run. Archaeologists have discovered traces of submerged forests and settlements beneath the seabed, giving us a chilling snapshot of a landscape abruptly frozen in time by this disaster. After this event, Doggerland's landscape dramatically altered. Coastal areas permanently submerged, leaving behind scattered islands and increasingly fragmented territory. Those who survived would have faced extremely challenging conditions. Their familiar hunting grounds and waterways were suddenly gone or drastically reshaped, forcing them further inland toward already occupied territories. The environment itself became harsher as sea encroachment accelerated. As more land disappeared beneath the rising waters, The remaining terrain gradually transitioned into tundra-like conditions. Colder, windswept, and increasingly barren, the tundra, characterized by its stark, treeless landscape with tough grasses and scattered bushes, would have supported far less wildlife. This starkly contrasted with the abundant forests and lush wetlands Doggerlanders previously enjoyed. Without plentiful game, fishing grounds, and edible plants, survival would have become increasingly difficult. Hunger and exposure likely led to significant population decline. As archaeological evidence suggests, many simply perished under worsening conditions. Those who tried to escape inland toward continental Europe or Britain faced other dangers. These lands weren't empty. They were already home to established tribes who were fiercely protective of their territories and resources. Competition over increasingly scarce hunting grounds and freshwater sources likely triggered conflict. Interactions would have ranged from cautious alliances to outright violence as groups fought for survival. As a result, many Doggerland refugees may have been absorbed into other communities, their culture and customs blending and eventually fading from distinct identity. Others, tragically, were likely wiped out entirely in conflicts over resources. Today, fishermen working in the North Sea occasionally pull up artifacts from their nets, bone tools, ancient weapons, or animal remains that once belonged to Doggerland's residents. Modern scientific techniques, such as sonar mapping and underwater surveys, have helped archaeologists reconstruct this lost landscape, bringing Doggerland back into clearer focus. Recent surveys have even identified submerged river valleys and hilltops that once rose proudly above sea level, providing further insight into this vanished land. A particularly fascinating discovery came from truas near the Dogger Bank, a shallow area in the North Sea. Fishermen regularly dredge up bones from mammoths and giant deer, creatures that once roamed freely across Doggerland's plains. Occasionally, they also uncover unmistakable signs of human habitation, such as spear points and tools, vividly highlighting how thoroughly this territory was inhabited before the flooding event. These findings have provided a remarkable glimpse into the daily lives of Doggerland's ancient residents, underscoring their dependence on rich natural resources. What makes Doggerland's disappearance so intriguing is not just how quickly it vanished beneath the waves, but also how little historical memory remained of this once bustling region. Without written records, Doggerland faded into myth and legend, remembered only vaguely through ancient stories passed down generations in coastal communities. Ultimately, Doggerland's tragic end serves as a powerful reminder of nature's overwhelming power, capable of reshaping the landscape and human societies in an instant. Yet, it also highlights the adaptability and resilience of ancient peoples who navigated incredibly challenging circumstances. The survivors who relocated to higher grounds in Britain and continental Europe carried with them knowledge and skills that influenced future cultures and settlements throughout the region. Doggerland stands today as a fascinating archaeological puzzle slowly being pieced together beneath the waves by dedicated scientists and historians. Each new find, from carefully preserved hunting gear to submerged village sites, offers a clearer picture of this lost world and the dramatic forces that erased it from the map. Speaking of sudden collapses, imagine dozens of civilizations falling simultaneously. Welcome to the Bronze Age. If you've ever heard the phrase "history repeats itself," you might wonder how true it really is. Well, around 1200 BC, the ancient civilizations of the Eastern Mediterranean and Near East experienced a mysterious collapse so dramatic and widespread that it almost seems like something from an epic movie. Historians call this tumultuous period the Bronze Age collapse, a chaotic era marked by the sudden downfall of powerful kingdoms that had stood for centuries. Before this collapse, the Mediterranean was thriving. Major civilizations like the Egyptians, the mighty Hittites of Anatolia, the sophisticated Mycenaeans of Greece, and the city-states of Canaan were all at their peak. They traded goods, exchanged cultural ideas, and were interconnected by networks that reached across the sea and deep into inland regions. Think of it as a bustling global marketplace. But instead of smartphones and sneakers, they traded bronze, wine, textiles, pottery, and exotic treasures. The Bronze Age was a vibrant time full of innovation, artistic achievement, and impressive political alliances. Then, seemingly overnight, everything fell apart. Cities across this region were suddenly burned, abandoned, or destroyed. Prosperous trading hubs emptied out. Palaces were left deserted, and entire civilizations vanished or declined dramatically. The bustling ports of Ugarit, the grand palaces of the Mycenaean kings, and the mighty Hittite Empire all reduced to rubble. Imagine walking through a bustling metropolis, and suddenly, almost overnight, finding yourself alone among silent ruins. That's essentially what happened across the Eastern Mediterranean during this astonishing collapse. Ancient texts and archaeological records offer clues to what occurred. Mysterious inscriptions from this chaotic period repeatedly mention enigmatic invaders, known only as the Sea People's Egyptian temple walls. Depict these mysterious figures as fierce warriors sailing from distant lands armed with swords and shields, descending upon coastal cities without warning. Who were these Sea Peoples, and why did they suddenly appear, leaving widespread destruction in their wake? Inscriptions from the Egyptian pharaoh Ramses III's temple at Medinet Habu vividly describe epic battles fought against these enigmatic invaders. Ramses III famously boasts of defeating them, claiming to have protected Egypt from annihilation. Yet Egypt was one of the few civilizations to survive relatively intact. Other powerful kingdoms, including the Hittites and the Mycenaeans, weren't so fortunate. The Sea Peoples left such profound destruction that their attacks were seen as pivotal events responsible for the widespread collapse across the region. But who exactly were these Sea Peoples? Historians have puzzled over their identity for centuries. They appear abruptly in historical records, portrayed as fierce warriors and expert sailors originating from unknown lands. Some scholars speculate they came from the Iron, perhaps displaced by famines, invasions, or environmental disasters. Others suggest a mix of various tribes and displaced populations converging in a confederation driven by desperation, warfare, or ecological pressures. While their exact origins remain debated, their impact was undeniably profound. Archaeological evidence shows that many coastal cities were violently destroyed during this period. Excavations reveal charred buildings, burned temples, and defensive walls hastily constructed, proof of desperate attempts to protect against sudden attack. Imagine coastal communities watching anxiously as unfamiliar ships appear on the horizon, knowing their lives could change forever. Interestingly, the Sea Peoples weren't the only suspects behind the Bronze Age collapse. Modern archaeologists and historians have identified multiple interconnected factors that may have combined to create the perfect storm. One prominent theory involves environmental changes, specifically prolonged drought and famine. Geological evidence and ancient pollen analysis indicate that the Eastern Mediterranean suffered severe drought conditions around this time. Without sufficient rainfall, crops failed repeatedly, leading to widespread famine, weakening once prosperous civilizations and leaving them vulnerable to invasions. Imagine the powerful Hittite Empire, known for its military strength and sprawling territory. Underneath this seemingly invincible exterior, severe droughts depleted their food supply and resources. Starvation weakened internal stability, making it harder to repel invasions. Archaeological digs reveal abandoned grain storage sites and dwindling food reserves, clear signs of prolonged resource scarcity. Alongside drought, seismic activity likely played a role too. The Mediterranean region is prone to earthquakes, and several major cities, including Troy and Mycenaean centers, show signs of significant earthquake damage during this period. Visualize city walls cracked open, houses collapsed, and trade routes suddenly disrupted, adding another layer of devastation to already weakened societies. As these factors compounded, climate disasters, earthquakes, resource shortages, societies became increasingly fragile. Political alliances fractured and trade networks collapsed, leaving formerly connected cities isolated and desperate. Amid this chaos, the Sea Peoples, driven possibly by similar hardships, found prime opportunities for invasion and settlement. Egypt, however, provides a fascinating counterpoint. While Ramses III successfully repelled the Sea Peoples, inscriptions at Medinet Habu record a grim victory. Egypt survived but was severely weakened economically and politically. Trade routes diminished, alliances vanished, and Egypt retreated into a more isolated existence. Ironically, despite claiming victory, the Egyptians entered a slow decline, becoming a shadow of their former empire. But for other societies, collapse was immediate and total. Consider the mighty Hittite Empire in Anatolia. At its peak, it rivaled Egypt in power, boasting sophisticated government structures and extensive trade networks. Yet within a few decades, the Hittites vanished entirely. Their capital city, Hattusa, was abandoned, its gates burned, palaces looted, and temples left in ruins. For centuries afterward, the Hittites faded into legend, remembered only in scattered historical references until modern archaeology rediscovered their grand civilization. Likewise, the Mycenaean Greeks, famous from legends of the Trojan War, suffered a dramatic downfall. Great cities like Mene, Tirana, and Chios were suddenly deserted, palaces destroyed by fire and inhabitants scattered. Greek history entered a dark age, with writing itself disappearing for several centuries afterward. Visualize ancient scribes carefully inscribing tablets, suddenly silenced, their records lost to history. Even the rich trading city of Ugarit in modern-day Syria vanished swiftly. Archaeologists uncovered desperate final messages etched into clay tablets describing invasions by mysterious attackers. One famously haunting tablet reads, "My father, behold, the enemy's ships came here. My cities were burned, and they did evil in my country." After these final words, Ugarit disappears from history, consumed by chaos. The Bronze Age collapse, therefore, wasn't the result of a single cause, but a devastating combination of environmental disasters, economic upheaval, warfare, and migrations. These factors reinforced each other, causing civilizations to fall like dominoes one after another. Yet, at the center of this drama stood the enigmatic Sea Peoples, their sudden emergence and devastating raids forever etched into history. Today, archaeologists continue exploring their identity. Some suggest these groups were refugees themselves, fleeing similar calamities, desperate for new homes and resources. Others propose they were opportunistic invaders taking advantage of regional instability. But despite countless debates and discoveries, the exact origins and motivations of the Sea Peoples remain tantalizingly uncertain. Interestingly, the collapse also reshaped the Mediterranean dramatically. Old empires vanished, replaced by smaller city-states and new political configurations. Cultural exchange diminished temporarily, creating isolated communities. Trade eventually resumed, but the intricate connections of the late Bronze Age were forever altered. Ultimately, the Bronze Age collapse stands out as one of history's greatest mysteries, a perfect storm that toppled some of the ancient world's most powerful civilizations. The Sea Peoples remain compelling and mysterious figures, leaving us wondering if we'll ever discover their true identity. And while Egypt might have survived the Sea Peoples, centuries later, an entire city vanished overnight beneath its waters. When most of us think about ancient Egyptian cities, we typically picture towering pyramids, bustling streets along the Nile, and sprawling desert landscapes. But hidden beneath the waters of the Mediterranean lies a remarkable exception, Thonis Heracleion, a city that once stood as Egypt's gateway to the Mediterranean world. Today, this ancient metropolis rests quietly under several meters of seawater, its grand temples and busy marketplaces concealed beneath waves, sand, and centuries of silence. Over 2,000 years ago, Thanosis Heracleion was a thriving hub of commerce and culture, strategically located near the mouth of the Nile. Where it met the Mediterranean Sea, the city was so prominent that it was both a religious and economic center, essential to the trade between ancient Egypt and other civilizations around the Mediterranean. Ships from Greece, Venetia, and beyond regularly docked at its ports, exchanging precious goods like grain, spices, gold, and pottery. Its streets buzzed with traders speaking different languages. Temples dedicated to Egyptian gods stood proudly by the harbor, and the city thrived thanks to its critical location and vibrant international connections. Yet mysteriously, Thanos Heracleion vanished around the 2nd century BC. Ancient writings briefly mentioned the city, but after its disappearance it faded into myth and legend. Historians and archaeologists long assumed it might have been merely a mythic place or perhaps confused with another city. For centuries, Thanos Heracleion was essentially forgotten, remembered vaguely through scattered references in ancient texts. That is until the early 2000s, when underwater archaeologists made one of the most surprising discoveries in recent history. While mapping submerged areas near Alexandria, Egypt, archaeologist Frank Gadio stumbled upon massive stone structures hidden beneath the waves. What they uncovered was extraordinary. Not merely scattered artifacts, but an entire city stunningly preserved beneath layers of sand and silt. Imagine the excitement. After thousands of years of silence, the ancient city of Thanos Heracleion had finally been rediscovered, submerged beneath the sea. Archaeologists quickly realized that this wasn't just a minor discovery, but a groundbreaking revelation. Beneath the water, temples, statues, and even entire streets appeared in remarkable condition. Researchers uncovered giant stone statues, still standing upright as though patiently awaiting discovery. Granite sculptures of gods and pharaohs, intricately carved stone tablets, golden coins, jewelry, and everyday items like pottery and fishing equipment were found remarkably preserved, protected by layers of sediment on the seabed. Perhaps most astonishingly, divers found the remains of over 60 shipwrecks scattered around the sunken port. Each vessel had once carried precious goods, now offering archaeologists detailed clues about ancient trade networks. Carefully preserved ropes, anchors, and even cargoes still packed in their original positions provided an unprecedented snapshot of daily life and commerce in Thanos Heracleion. Picture dozens of ships frozen in time beneath the waves, their cargo never delivered, their voyages abruptly halted by the city's dramatic fate. So, how did such a vibrant city end up submerged beneath the Mediterranean? Geological studies offer the best clues. Thus, Heracleion was constructed on islands in the Nile Delta, connected by canals and surrounded by marshlands. Over time, natural disasters, including earthquakes and flooding, slowly destabilized the ground beneath the city. Rising sea levels combined with gradual subsidence of land, meaning the ground was literally sinking, made Thanos Heracleion increasingly vulnerable. Eventually, these factors culminated in a sudden and catastrophic event, likely a massive flood or earthquake that caused parts of the city to collapse directly into the sea. Imagine the scene: inhabitants going about their day, traders bartering goods in the marketplace, priests conducting rituals in temples, only to suddenly feel the ground beneath their feet tremble and collapse. Within hours or possibly days, portions of thus Heracleion sank beneath rising waters, dragging buildings, ships, and people down with it. The city's fate was sealed in one devastating event, disappearing beneath waves where it remained hidden for centuries. Interestingly, ancient Egyptians were excellent record keepers, yet remarkably few texts explicitly describe this event. Perhaps it happened gradually enough to allow most inhabitants to escape, or perhaps it occurred so abruptly and catastrophically that no clear record survived. Either way, the city's sudden vanishing only adds to its mystery. Recent archaeological expeditions continue to uncover more incredible details, each excavation adding clarity and complexity to Thonis Heracleon's fascinating story. In 2021, divers even found a well-preserved ancient warship from the 4th century BC resting undisturbed on the seabed. Finds like these paint a vivid picture of the city at its height. Busy ports filled with vessels, vibrant cultural exchanges, and the ceaseless movement of trade goods and ideas. Thus, Heracleon also provides intriguing insights into Egyptian religion. Temples uncovered beneath the waves show intricate carvings dedicated to deities, like a moon garb who held particular significance in this maritime city. Statues and ritual objects offer a fascinating glimpse into religious ceremonies conducted by priests centuries ago. Even underwater, these finds vividly illustrate the religious devotion and practices of ancient Egyptians. Of course, Thonis Heracleon's discovery has sparked plenty of speculation. Could there be more ancient Egyptian cities hidden beneath Mediterranean waters? Egypt's coast has seen massive geological shifts and sea level changes throughout history, meaning other lost settlements may be waiting silently beneath the waves. Archaeologists continue exploring offshore areas, hoping to uncover further lost cities or towns swallowed by the sea. Each discovery potentially rewriting our understanding of ancient Egypt. Today, Thonis Heracleon stands as one of archaeology's most captivating underwater discoveries, offering a rare snapshot of an ancient city preserved almost intact beneath the sea. Its mysterious disappearance and remarkable rediscovery remind us that history often keeps its secrets carefully hidden, waiting patiently to be uncovered. Across Europe, smaller cultures vanished quietly, but left behind big questions. Now let's journey north away from the Mediterranean shores to a small area near Hamura Sand in Norway. Here along the rugged Scandinavian coastline, archaeologists have uncovered remnants of a once thriving society known as the funnel beaker culture, named after the distinctive pottery they crafted, characterized by funnel-shaped necks and elegantly simple decorations. While the name might evoke images of quirky kitchenware, this culture was actually a sophisticated, widespread society across northern Europe during the Neolithic period, roughly between 4300 and 2800 BC. So who exactly were the funnel beaker people? Well, picture communities of farmers and herders scattered across what we now know as Germany, Denmark, Sweden, and Norway. They weren't empire builders in the traditional sense. Instead, they lived in small cooperative villages relying heavily on agriculture and animal husbandry. Their villages dotted the landscape surrounded by lush forests, rivers rich with fish, and fields where they grew cereals like barley and wheat. They domesticated animals like cattle and pigs, and likely lived in modest wooden houses with central hearths to keep warm during the long Scandinavian winters. But what's particularly intriguing about the funnel beaker culture isn't just their pottery, it's their ritualistic and cultural practices. These people built impressive stone structures, including burial mounds known as dolmens and passage graves, massive stone monuments that still stand impressively across northern Europe today. Imagine gathering your community to carefully stack enormous stones, constructing monuments that honored ancestors and possibly served as important ceremonial sites. These ancient tombs suggest a strong spiritual life and complex social structures within funnel beaker societies. Yet, despite their apparent success, something dramatic happened around Hamar Sanden. Archaeologists excavating sites in this area discovered evidence that funnel beaker settlements suddenly and mysteriously disappeared almost overnight. One day these communities were thriving, busy with daily life. The next their settlements lay empty, abandoned so abruptly that household items, tools, pottery, and even meals remained exactly where their owners had left them. The abruptness of their disappearance has sparked considerable speculation. How could a seemingly stable community vanish without a trace practically overnight? Historians have put forward several theories. Some suggest a sudden climate shift as a likely culprit. Scandinavia's climate has historically swung between extremes, from mild periods ideal for farming to harsh cold spells that could devastate agriculture. Imagine waking one morning to an unexpected frost, destroying an entire year's crops, leaving no choice but to move quickly or face starvation. Archaeological layers indeed indicate periods of sudden climate deterioration around the time these settlements vanished. Alternatively, conflicts with neighboring cultures might have played a role. Competition for resources like fertile farmland, grazing land for cattle, or access to fishing and hunting grounds could easily lead to clashes between groups. Funnel beaker communities weren't isolated. Their territories overlapped with other cultures, including hunter-gatherers, who might have viewed these settled farmers as encroaching on traditional lands. Could a sudden, devastating conflict have forced the funnel beaker people to flee or be wiped out entirely? While direct evidence for widespread violence isn't abundant, a swift exodus due to threat or attack remains plausible. But what's particularly convincing is the archaeological evidence from sites around Hammersanden. Excavations reveal homes abandoned hastily, tools scattered across work areas, and pottery fragments dropped mid-task. Cooking pots were left over fires that long since extinguished. Half-finished stone tools abandoned as if their makers planned to return any minute. It's as if the villagers dropped everything and simply vanished without warning. This vivid snapshot strongly suggests that whatever caused their disappearance happened fast and without time for preparation. Even more mysteriously, funnel beaker pottery and tools discovered far from their original territories hint that survivors may have migrated quickly, possibly integrating with other communities. The presence of funnel beaker artifacts in distant unrelated archaeological sites could indicate displaced populations fleeing southward or inland, leaving behind their homes forever. Despite extensive research, the exact fate of the funnel beaker culture around Hammersanden remains tantalizingly elusive. Did climate change force them from their homes overnight? Were they victims of violent conflict driven away in a sudden attack? Or was it a combination of these factors, a devastating climatic event weakening their community and leaving them vulnerable to aggression? The mystery endures. These smaller European
cultures, like Baker, people remind us that civilizations don't have to build grand cities or massive monuments to be significant. Sometimes quiet, smaller-scale communities leave behind mysteries, just as compelling as those left by their more famous counterparts. Though less renowned than ancient Egypt or Bronze Age Greece, their sudden and complete disappearance poses equally intriguing questions. Archaeologists continue to investigate funnel beaker sites across northern Europe, each excavation bringing new clues to light, deepening our understanding of these ancient communities. The sudden abandonment near Hammersanden remains particularly intriguing, an unsolved historical mystery that still captivates historians and enthusiasts alike. Were small European cultures like the funnel beaker, people more fragile than their larger counterparts, easily disrupted by climate or conflict? Or does their sudden disappearance simply highlight how much we still don't fully understand about these ancient societies? Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, an enormous civilization vanished so completely, it left no records. When we think of ancient civilizations, Egypt or Mesopotamia usually spring to mind with their iconic pyramids, ziggurats, and grand monuments. But there was another contemporary civilization, equally impressive, yet far less familiar to most: the Indus Valley Civilization. Often overlooked, this ancient culture once stretched across what is now modern-day Pakistan, northwest India, and parts of Afghanistan. Flourishing around 3300 BC and reaching its peak between 2600 and 1900 BC, the Indus Valley Civilization was not only vast, but remarkably advanced for its time. Picture yourself walking through a bustling, vibrant city 4,000 years ago. Wide streets laid out in careful grid patterns. Brick buildings organized into neatly planned neighborhoods. sophisticated drainage systems running beneath your feet. It's all surprisingly modern sounding, right? But this isn't Rome or Athens. It's Mohenjo-daro or Harappa, two major cities of the Indus Valley civilization. These settlements boasted impressive urban planning far ahead of their contemporaries. Streets intersected at right angles. Multi-story brick homes lined thoroughfares. And most incredibly, they had comprehensive sewage systems complete with flushing toilets and wastewater drains. Luxuries that most other civilizations wouldn't see for millennia. Mohenjo-daro, in particular, gives us a clear snapshot of their sophisticated infrastructure. Imagine city blocks neatly arranged around central courtyards, public baths, and communal wells ensuring water for everyone. Their signature Great Bath, a large brick-lined pool, was likely used for religious or ritualistic purposes, and it's easy to visualize locals gathering around its edges, sharing stories and exchanging news. The city's attention to sanitation was extraordinary. Homes were equipped with personal toilets and wastewater channels, preventing the spread of diseases. This was a level of hygiene and city management that Europe wouldn't match until thousands of years later. The Indus civilization was not just urban savvy. They were culturally rich and economically prosperous. They developed intricate crafts, pottery, jewelry, and even seals engraved with mysterious symbols and depictions of animals. These seals likely served as trading stamps or identification markers. Traders used them extensively, suggesting a robust trade network extending far beyond their immediate region. Archaeological finds show goods from as far as Mesopotamia, highlighting extensive commercial relationships and cultural exchanges. Yet, despite their size and sophistication, the Indus people remain one of archaeology's greatest puzzles, partly because we haven't deciphered their writing. Their language found inscribed on thousands of clay, tablets, and seals remains undeciphered, leaving us guessing at their stories, beliefs, and day-to-day lives. Imagine having an entire civilization's writings in your hand, but no way to understand what they're saying. It's both fascinating and frustrating for researchers today. But even more puzzling than their writing is their mysterious and sudden decline. Around 1900 BC, the vibrant Indus civilization rapidly began to collapse. Cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, once thriving, were suddenly abandoned. Homes were deserted, marketplaces silenced, and streets that once bustled with life grew eerily quiet. How could millions of people across such vast regions suddenly vanish without leaving behind clear explanations? Several credible theories have emerged over the years to explain this. Dramatic disappearance. First and foremost is climate change. Archaeological and geological evidence indicates significant environmental shifts occurring during this period. Rivers, the lifeblood of their civilization, especially the mighty Sarasvati River, mentioned frequently in ancient Indian texts, dried up or changed course dramatically. Imagine waking one morning to find your primary source of water, irrigation, and transportation simply gone or drastically diminished. Agriculture, the backbone of the civilization, suffered immensely, triggering widespread food shortages and forcing entire populations to abandon their cities in search of more fertile lands. Supporting this climate theory, sediment analysis reveals significant changes in rainfall patterns around this time. Prolonged droughts would have devastated crop production, leaving city populations unable to sustain themselves. Archaeologists have found evidence of smaller scattered settlements emerging around the civilization's periphery, suggesting people migrated away from urban centers toward more sustainable rural lifestyles. This gradual dispersal paints a vivid image of families packing up their belongings, abandoning urban comfort, and heading into uncertain futures. Another compelling theory involves foreign invasions or internal conflicts. While some early scholars speculated invasions by Aryan tribes, Current archaeological evidence shows little sign of large-scale violence or warfare. The cities show almost no evidence of large-scale destruction or massacre. However, localized conflict or internal unrest driven by dwindling resources could have played a role in their decline. Perhaps competition for scarce resources intensified rivalries and conflicts within and between communities, weakening societal cohesion and accelerating abandonment. Still, earthquakes have also been suggested as potential culprits. The Indus Valley region lies within an earthquake-prone area, and geological studies have found evidence of seismic activity from the period of the civilization's decline. Imagine the horror of sudden tremors reducing well-planned brick buildings to rubble overnight, destroying infrastructure, blocking rivers, and drastically altering landscapes. Such sudden catastrophes could have contributed significantly to destabilizing cities, forcing people to relocate rapidly. Despite extensive research, the definitive cause of the Indus civilization's collapse remains uncertain. Archaeologists and historians continue piecing together clues, environmental, geological, and cultural, to form a coherent picture. Recent excavations continue to reveal fascinating insights, including preserved grains and foods found in storage areas, suggesting residents expected life to continue normally until it abruptly didn't. Yet, the most intriguing archaeological discoveries from this region might be underwater. Recent sonar scans off the coast of Western India revealed submerged structures and what appear to be streets, potentially remnants of Indus-era settlements swallowed by rising seas and geological shifts. Could more submerged cities be hiding beneath the Arabian Sea, silently holding secrets of the Indus civilization's final days? Interestingly, the Indus civilization left remarkably little behind in terms of grand monuments or statues of rulers, not unlike their contemporaries in Egypt and Mesopotamia. They seem to have valued community organization and practical infrastructure over grandiose displays of power. This humility, however, makes their sudden disappearance even more puzzling. Millions of people vanished, leaving behind mostly quiet, practical remains, making it difficult for archaeologists to piece together their full story. Ultimately, the Indus Valley civilization stands out for its sheer scale, sophisticated urban design, advanced infrastructure, and complex cultural practices. At its peak, it was home to millions across hundreds of settlements and cities, creating a civilization whose advancements rivaled those of ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia. And yet, unlike those other ancient societies, the Indus civilization left behind almost no clues in historical writings to explain its sudden and mysterious collapse. Archaeologists, historians, and linguists continue working tirelessly to decode their language, explore their submerged cities, and piece together their complex story. Each new discovery brings fresh perspectives and deeper appreciation for this extraordinary civilization. But despite continuous efforts, the question lingers hauntingly. How could millions disappear without leaving clear answers? From South Asia to high in the Andes, another advanced city mysteriously collapsed. High on the Altiplano of Bolivia, almost 13,000 feet above sea level, sits one of South America's most fascinating archaeological sites, Tiwanaku. When you think about civilizations thriving in extreme conditions, Tiwanaku sets the bar remarkably high. Literally, it's a civilization that not only adapted to a tough environment, but flourished, achieving impressive advances in agriculture, stonemasonry, and societal organization long before the Inca rose to prominence. Around 400 AD, the people of Tiwanaku established their city near Lake Titicaca, a place where the air is thin. Temperatures fluctuate drastically, and crops don't exactly thrive effortlessly. But rather than being deterred, Tiwanaku's people developed remarkably sophisticated solutions. Instead of relying solely on traditional farming techniques, They created an innovative agricultural method known as raised field agriculture. Imagine vast networks of carefully built earthen platforms rising above shallow channels of water. Each field strategically positioned to protect crops from frost and harness the sun's heat, helping them grow even at these dizzying altitudes. These channels weren't just decorative. These channels weren't just decorative. They acted like natural thermostats. During the day, the sun would warm the water, which then radiated heat through the soil at night, creating a stable, warmer microclimate. It's as if these ancient farmers had discovered early greenhouse technology without glass or plastic. With such innovative methods, the Tiwanaku civilization produced abundant harvests of potatoes, quinoa, maize, and beans. Feeding a growing urban population. It's remarkable how cleverly they tackled problems that modern farmers might still find daunting. The city's inhabitants didn't just excel at farming. They were skilled stonemasons too. Their architecture showcased enormous blocks of precisely cut stone to fit together so perfectly. Not even a sheet of paper could slip between them. Tiwanaku's stone structures were as aesthetically pleasing as they were sturdy, featuring detailed carvings and symbolic imagery. The famous Gateway of the Sun, a massive stone arch carved from a single piece of rock, still stands as testament to their craftsmanship. Walking through Tiwanaku at its peak would have felt like stepping into a vibrant city of plazas, temples, and markets bustling with artisans, farmers, priests, and merchants, all thriving despite their challenging environment. But here's where the mystery begins. Around 1000 AD, Tiwanaku suddenly and inexplicably collapsed. Within a relatively short span of time, the population dramatically dwindled and the city was abruptly abandoned. What caused this abrupt downfall after centuries of success and innovation? One of the strongest theories points toward an environmental catastrophe, specifically a prolonged and devastating drought that archaeologists and climatologists have uncovered. Strong evidence suggesting a significant shift in regional climate around the time of Tiwanaku's collapse. Sediment cores from Lake Titicaca show layers of dried mud, signaling extended periods of low rainfall. Imagine a society that had brilliantly adapted to its environment, suddenly confronted by severe water shortages. Their sophisticated raised fields, dependent on water channels and predictable weather, would have quickly become useless. Fields dried up, crops failed, and food supplies dwindled to critical levels. It's not difficult to visualize how rapidly life in Tiwanaku would have changed. Imagine farmers waking each day to find their carefully engineered fields cracked and dry, the vital irrigation channels running empty. Desperation would have spread quickly as previously abundant harvests vanished. Markets would have emptied, leaving merchants with nothing to sell. Temples that once buzzed with activity would have become silent as the rituals performed to ensure good harvests appeared increasingly futile. Alongside drought, other researchers speculate that Tiwanaku might have suffered from its own ambition. As the population expanded, the city's demand for resources grew. This inevitably put pressure on surrounding agricultural areas, forests, and water sources. While their raised field agriculture was innovative, it relied heavily on delicate ecological balance. Once that balance was disrupted, whether by drought, overpopulation, or environmental degradation, the entire system could collapse swiftly. Archaeologists have found compelling evidence supporting this rapid collapse. Excavations of Taiwan and surrounding settlements reveal abandoned homes, unfinished buildings, and fields left halfway through harvest cycles. Clear indications of sudden disruption. Tools, pottery, and household items were found precisely where their owners left them, suggesting residents departed quickly, perhaps intending to return, but they never did. Interestingly, signs of conflict or warfare are notably scarce at Tiwanaku. Unlike other vanished civilizations, there's little evidence to suggest invasion or violent upheaval. The city's downfall seems driven predominantly by environmental factors rather than aggressive neighbors. Still, internal social tensions caused by food shortages or competition over dwindling resources likely exacerbated their challenges. With water sources drying up and food becoming scarce, societal stress would have mounted quickly, potentially prompting residents to abandon their homes in search of better conditions elsewhere. And that's exactly what archaeological evidence suggests. In the decades following Tiwanaku's abandonment, settlements in lower altitude regions nearby grew, likely absorbing migrants fleeing the collapsed city. Communities who once thrived at these extreme heights were forced to scatter, bringing their cultural traditions and skills with them, influencing later Andean civilizations like the Inca. But despite ongoing research, one question remains intriguingly unanswered. Did Tiwanaku's ambitions simply exceed its environmental resources? Perhaps by mastering their challenging environment and growing too quickly, they inadvertently created a situation from which they could not recover. The disappearance of such an advanced civilization, particularly one that had seemingly conquered nature itself, raises captivating questions about the delicate balance between human ambition and environmental limitations. Today, Tiwanaku remains an iconic archaeological site, attracting researchers and tourists alike who marvel at the city's ingenuity and mystery. Recent excavations continue revealing new details, painting an increasingly vivid picture of daily life. Craft workshops, ceremonial spaces, residential areas, all testifying to the city's former vibrancy. Yet, for all we know about Tiwanaku, its sudden decline still intrigues historians. How could a civilization so sophisticated, resilient, and inventive suddenly disappear, leaving behind only empty streets, unfinished buildings, and unanswered questions? From its sophisticated farming techniques to its extraordinary masonry skills, Tiwanaku stands as a testament to human creativity and adaptability, but also to vulnerability. Its sudden collapse highlights just how rapidly environmental factors can impact even the most ingenious societies. However, unlike droughts, volcanoes aren't picky. Across the globe in Thera, another eruption buried a thriving culture. Imagine a thriving port city busy with traders bartering goods, artisans creating stunning artwork, and families going about their daily lives. Streets filled with vibrant murals depicting scenes of nature, marine life, and elaborate rituals. Houses built several stories high, equipped with advanced plumbing and drainage systems. It might sound like a modern description, but in reality, this was Akrotiri, a prosperous Bronze Age settlement located on the volcanic island of Thera, modern-day Santorini around 1600 BC. Akrotiri was part of the Minoan civilization. Though situated north of the famous Minoan heartland on Crete, what made Akrotiri exceptional was its strategic location. The settlement lay at the crossroads of the Mediterranean, acting as a hub connecting Egypt, Crete, mainland Greece, and the Near East. As a result, it flourished through trade, becoming wealthy and culturally sophisticated with influences from across the region. Imagine standing on its docks, Egyptian ships unloading spices, Minoan vessels trading pottery and textiles, and merchants from Anatolia exchanging metals and precious stones. This cosmopolitan atmosphere gave rise to a unique and eclectic culture, blending elements from various Mediterranean civilizations into its own distinctive style. The residents of Akrotiri weren't just successful traders. They were remarkable artists. Their frescoes are among the most sophisticated and beautiful from the ancient world, filled with vivid colors and intricate details depicting scenes of life, nature, and religion. Imagine entire rooms adorned with stunning images of blue monkeys, graceful dolphins, and lies blooming vividly. Archaeologists have discovered fresco illustrating complex rituals, ships sailing peacefully on calm seas, and daily activities that hint at a prosperous, peaceful society. Akrotiri was also an architectural marvel of its time. Buildings were constructed from stone and mud brick, often several stories high, with flat roofs that served as extra living space. Homes featured elaborate drainage systems, toilets connected to sophisticated sewage channels, and storage rooms filled with pottery, wine, olive oil, and grain. It was a community that enjoyed comforts uncommon for their time, highlighting their wealth and organization. Yet behind this vibrant city lurked danger. Akrotiri sat on the island of Thera, a volcano quietly building pressure beneath its surface. The inhabitants had no way of knowing it, but their thriving community rested precariously on a geological ticking time bomb. Sometime around 1600 BC, Thera erupted in one of the largest volcanic explosions in recorded human history, dramatically reshaping the island and sending shock waves across the Mediterranean dot. Imagine the scene on that fateful day. The ground trembling violently, a dark plume of ash rocketing miles into the sky, and pyroclastic flows. Superheated clouds of volcanic gas, ash, and pumice racing down the mountainside at devastating speeds. The once bustling port town, which had likely been abandoned shortly before due to preliminary earthquakes, was rapidly buried beneath thick layers of volcanic ash, preserving the city in astonishing detail. The eruption was cataclysmic, affecting not only Akrotiri, but also surrounding islands and civilizations. The immediate region faced devastating tsunamis triggered by the volcanic collapse. Massive waves reached Crete, severely damaging coastal settlements and harbors, possibly contributing to the decline of the larger Minoan civilization. Coastal cities across the Mediterranean felt the impact. Ports were damaged, trade disrupted, and lives lost. Historical writings from ancient Egypt describe strange environmental phenomena around the same period, like abnormal weather and darkened skies, perhaps echoing the distant effects of Thera's eruption. Remarkably, unlike Pompeii's tragic victims, Akrotiri itself revealed no human casualties. Excavations have uncovered no remains of bodies or signs of mass panic. Instead, evidence suggests inhabitants had advanced warnings, likely from earthquakes and smaller volcanic activities that gave them precious time to evacuate, taking valuable possessions with them. The absence of bodies, personal treasures, or portable goods strongly suggests an organized departure rather than sudden catastrophe. But where exactly did the people go? That's another mystery still unsolved. Even though the people vanished, the city remained astonishingly preserved under layers of volcanic ash. When archaeologists began excavating Akrotiri in 1967, they were amazed by how intact buildings, fresco, and everyday items remained. The thick ash created an environment that protected delicate artworks and structures from erosion and decay. Today, visitors and archaeologists alike can walk the same streets as Akrotiri's ancient inhabitants, gaze at walls painted millennia ago, and marvel at the city's sophisticated infrastructure preserved as if frozen in time. But the intrigue doesn't end with the city itself. Akrotiri's destruction has fueled speculation, linking the eruption to one of history's most enduring legends, Atlantis. Ancient Greek philosopher Plato famously described a powerful civilization, rich and sophisticated, suddenly swallowed by the sea in a catastrophic event. Could Thera's massive eruption and subsequent tsunamis have inspired Plato's Atlantis myth? While direct evidence linking Thera to Plato's Atlantis remains elusive, many scholars find the connections compelling. Plato wrote of an advanced island civilization, vibrant and wealthy, destroyed in a single catastrophic day and night. Akrotiri fits remarkably well-advanced architecture, thriving economy, sudden catastrophic end, offering tantalizing parallels. Historians continue to debate, intrigued by how closely Thera's eruption mirrors the mythical Atlantis story Plato recounted over a millennium later. Interestingly, Plato himself placed Atlantis near the Pillars of Hercules, today associated with the Strait of Gibraltar. However, many believe Plato's geography was symbolic or misunderstood. Oral traditions and stories of Thera's devastation might have traveled across generations, evolving into the Atlantis legend Plato recorded centuries later. Imagine ancient sailors sharing stories of the prosperous city destroyed overnight by volcanic fury, gradually becoming the legendary Atlantis of mythology. Regardless of the Atlantis connection, the eruption of Thera had real historical consequences. By damaging coastal ports and disrupting maritime trade routes, it likely contributed significantly to the decline of the Minoan civilization on Crete, which depended heavily on maritime commerce. The volcanic ash spewed into the atmosphere affected global climate patterns, causing cooler temperatures and abnormal weather as far away as China and the Middle East. Historical records from Egypt's New Kingdom note irregular weather events and agricultural difficulties around the same period, possibly connected to the distant effects of the volcanic eruption. Today, Akrotiri offers a unique window into a lost Bronze Age civilization. Visitors marvel at beautifully preserved fresco, streets, and multi-story buildings. Artifacts like pottery, furniture, and even food containers provide a snapshot of daily life frozen at the moment of evacuation. It's like stepping back in time, wandering through streets that once echoed with commerce, laughter, and everyday conversations. Despite decades of excavation and research, many mysteries still surround Akrotiri. Where exactly did its residents go after evacuating? How did they manage such an organized departure? Did they re-establish their culture elsewhere? Or did it fade away entirely? And perhaps most intriguingly, could Akrotiri really be Plato's Atlantis, the legendary civilization that vanished beneath the waves? And while Akrotiri remarkably left intact ruins behind, some vanished cultures leave little behind. Like the mysterious Magna Hungaria, when it comes to ancient civilizations, some names like Egypt or Greece instantly spring to mind, conjuring images of pyramids and temples. Magna Hungaria, however, probably isn't one you've heard about often, if ever. Yet, this intriguing culture, once nestled deep within the forests and plains east of the Ural Mountains in what's now modern-day Russia, holds fascinating mysteries that still puzzle historians today. Magna Hungaria, literally meaning Greater Hungary, wasn't actually in modern Hungary. Instead, it was an early homeland of the ancestors of the Hungarian people, a society existing around the first millennium CE, in the region known today as Bashorten, near the Volga River. These early Hungarians, often referred to as the Magyar tribes, lived semi-nomadic lifestyles, traveling and settling temporarily along fertile river valleys and forest edges, sustaining themselves through animal hunting, fishing, and limited agriculture. Historical references to Magna Hungaria are limited and often shrouded in ambiguity, making this culture all the more intriguing. One of the earliest mentions comes from medieval Hungarian chronicles, which describe the area as the ancestral homeland of the Magyars before their eventual migration westward into Europe. Arab geographers and travelers in the medieval period also recorded brief descriptions of these tribes, noting their distinctive language, customs, and appearance. Details that help historians piece together a picture of a unique culture on the fringes of medieval Eurasia. The Magyar tribes were known for their skilled horsemanship and impressive archery, a hallmark of many Eurasian steppe peoples. Visualize groups of skilled riders capable of shooting arrows accurately from horseback at full gallop, a feat impressive even today. Their nomadic lifestyle required efficiency and mobility, reflected in their simple but practical clothing: tunics, trousers, and boots suitable for riding in constant movement. Interestingly, Archaeological excavations have uncovered evidence of these ancient settlements, revealing artifacts like pottery, iron tools, weaponry, and horse gear, objects reflecting their daily lives and economy. Their craftsmanship indicates strong connections with neighboring peoples including Turks, Khazars, and other steppe societies, suggesting a vibrant cultural exchange happening at these frontier settlements. But around the late 9th century, something mysterious occurred. The Magyar tribes living in Magna Hungaria seemingly vanished from the region. Their settlements suddenly appeared abandoned, and their distinctive artifacts disappeared from archaeological records. How does an entire culture simply vanish without leaving clear clues behind? One leading theory is migration. Historical evidence suggests that around 895 CE, a significant group of Magyar tribes embarked on a large-scale westward migration toward the Carpathian Basin, what's now modern Hungary. This wasn't an overnight event. Migrations are complicated and slow. Yet, the abandonment of Magna Hungaria appears unusually swift and complete. Did environmental changes prompt this migration? Possibly. Climate shifts could have led to drought or declining pasture lands, compelling tribes to seek better territories further west. Another credible theory is assimilation. Magna Hungaria was located near the intersection of numerous powerful and culturally dominant steppe societies. The early Magyar tribes, relatively small compared to larger populations like the Khazars or Turks, might have gradually assimilated into these neighboring cultures, adopting their languages, customs, and identities until their original traditions disappeared entirely. It wouldn't have been an abrupt event. Rather a slow, subtle process where each generation became increasingly indistinguishable from their neighbors. Imagine a community that gradually blends into the surrounding societies, their unique customs quietly fading away, unnoticed by outsiders. Archaeological finds somewhat support this theory. Later artifacts in the region show fewer distinctly Magyar features and more influences from neighboring Turkic or Slavic cultures. This gradual blending might have happened peacefully through trade, intermarriage, and cultural exchanges, resulting in the slow disappearance of the original Magyar identity. Still, one particularly intriguing historical record suggests another possibility that conflicts with neighboring groups drove them away. While large-scale warfare evidence is scarce, the steppe was rarely peaceful for long. The Magyar tribes could have faced increasing pressure from powerful groups like the Patun, Kipchaks, or other emerging steppe confederations. Imagine a scenario where external threats grew steadily until eventually the community decided to leave before a larger conflict erupted. This pressure might have prompted a rapid migration, leaving their settlements deserted overnight, belongings hastily packed, and communities scattered. Interestingly, some scholars argue Magna Hungaria's disappearance might have involved a combination of these factors. Environmental challenges causing resource scarcity, pressures from more dominant neighboring societies, and gradual cultural assimilation. It might not have been a single dramatic event, but rather a combination of forces converging simultaneously, pushing the Magyar tribes to seek new lands, identities, and futures elsewhere. Yet, despite these credible theories, the exact details of their disappearance remain mysterious. Few written records from this early period survive, clearly enough to explain exactly what happened. What we know today comes primarily from archaeology and medieval chronicles, leaving gaps that continue to intrigue historians. One particularly fascinating archaeological find from recent years was a series of graves in the southern Ural containing artifacts remarkably similar to Magyar items found much farther west in Hungary. This discovery suggested some tribes might have remained in the region longer, blending with other cultures or maintaining their original traditions in isolated pockets. Such finds make it clear that the transition from Magna Hungaria to the Hungarian plains wasn't straightforward, but rather a complex journey lasting generations. The enigmatic disappearance of Magna Hungaria presents a different type of historical mystery. Less about sudden disaster and more about cultural shifts, migrations, and quiet assimilation. While other civilizations discussed here vanished dramatically under volcanic eruptions or massive floods, Magna Hungaria's decline might have been quieter, yet equally intriguing. Their settlements emptied, their culture dissolved into neighboring societies, leaving behind subtle archaeological traces and fascinating historical questions. This raises a curious thought. Is Magna Hungaria's disappearance a rare peaceful ending among vanished civilizations? Rather than catastrophic destruction, their culture might have faded gradually and naturally into others. A silent disappearance rather than a dramatic one. If you've ever stood on the edge of a canyon in the American Southwest, you probably felt a sense of awe looking down at red sandstone cliffs that tower above sandy plains and dry riverbeds. But imagine for a moment that carved into those cliffs are entire cities, homes, meeting spaces, and storage rooms built right into the canyon walls. That's exactly what the ancestral pueblones, often called the Anastasia, created nearly 1,000 years ago, leaving behind some of the most unique archaeological sites in North America. The ancestral Puebloans thrived in regions that now span parts of Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah. For centuries, their communities built impressive cities that seemed to defy gravity, cleverly constructed high above the valley floors in natural aluves and cliff overhangs. Sites like Mesa Verde, Chaco Canyon, and Canyon Dealey offer some of the clearest examples of this unique architecture. Structures made from sandstone bricks and timber beams plastered carefully together with mud mortar. From a distance, these cliff dwellings blend seamlessly into the landscape, appearing almost organic, like they sprouted naturally from the cliffs themselves. But why build homes in such precarious locations? It's a fascinating question that archaeologists still ponder. For one, living high above the valley floors provided protection against potential threats from raiders to wild animals. Imagine climbing wooden ladders or carved footholds to reach your front door, easily pulled up behind you if danger approached. It also helped regulate temperatures, providing shelter from harsh summer sun and insulation from the biting winter cold. These cliffside dwellings were the ancient equivalent of prime real estate. Safe, cool in summer, warm in winter, and with stunning views. The ancestral Puebloans were also talented farmers, cultivating crops like maize, beans, and squash. They built intricate irrigation systems, channeling rainwater from canyon rims and seasonal streams into fields below, ingeniously maximizing scarce water resources. Their agricultural success allowed them to flourish, supporting large communities and enabling artisans and craftsmen to create beautiful pottery, intricate woven baskets, and impressive stone tools. The artifacts left behind, many still remarkably intact, offer rich insights into their daily lives, culture, and societal organization. Notably, the ancestral Puebloans also left vivid, mysterious petroglyphs and pictographs adorning canyon walls. These images depict everything from animals and hunting scenes to abstract symbols, whose meanings still puzzle archaeologists today. Standing in front of these ancient drawings feels like stepping back in time, looking at messages from people who lived and thrived in these challenging environments centuries ago. But around the late 13th century, something changed dramatically. The bustling cliff cities began emptying out, their inhabitants disappearing in a startlingly brief period. Large settlements like Mesa Verde and Cho Canyon, once thriving with thousands of residents, were left eerily silent. Their rooms abandoned, belongings left behind, pottery and baskets still neatly stored in corners as if their owners intended to return soon. Yet they never did. Theories abound about what drove this sudden disappearance, but the most credibly involves climate and social pressures. Tree ring studies and archaeological evidence indicate a prolonged drought struck the region between the late 1200s and early 1300s. Rainfall became sparse, rivers dried up, crops failed, and food supplies dwindled. Imagine communities whose survival depended on careful water management suddenly finding their life source, literally drying up beneath them. As drought intensified, food scarcity likely triggered social tensions. Archaeologists have found defensive structures and evidence of violence from this period, signs that communities struggled to manage dwindling resources. Competition over food, water, and farmland may have fractured social cohesion. Imagine families looking at dwindling grain stores, wondering how they'd survive another year, sparking fears and disputes among neighbors who once cooperated peacefully. Faced with severe environmental and social stress, many ancestral pueblos likely chose migration, leaving their ancestral cliff dwellings behind to seek more reliable resources elsewhere. Archaeologists have discovered settlements in nearby areas, places with better rainfall and more sustainable farming potential, suggesting that residents simply relocated in search of better lives. Yet, what's especially intriguing is how abruptly these settlements emptied. Some cliff dwellings appear abandoned suddenly, with items still neatly placed, as if residents planned a quick return. Was this a cautious migration with the intention to return someday? Or were they driven away so urgently they had little choice but to leave everything behind? This question still fuels speculation and research today. Interestingly, the ancestral Ploans didn't vanish completely. Their descendants, such as the Hopi and Pueblo peoples of modern-day Arizona and New Mexico, carry forward elements of their ancestors' culture, language, and agricultural techniques. Yet even they regard the ancient cliff cities with reverence and mystery, sometimes attributing their abandonment to spiritual forces or cautionary legends passed down through generations. Today, sites like Mesa Verde, with its iconic cliff palace, and Spruce Tree House attract countless visitors annually. Tourists wander through ancient rooms, climb ladders to reach ceremonial cause, and peer through windows that offer stunning views of the canyon below. Just as their original inhabitants once did. It's easy to imagine families cooking meals, children playing, and artisans crafting pottery or tools. All echoes of daily life preserved remarkably by these incredible ruins. A humorous modern parallel might be a classic ghost town from an old Western film. Empty saloons, dusty main streets, chairs left neatly pushed in, waiting for residents who never return. These cliff dwellings have a similarly eerie yet fascinating charm. Unlike abandoned mining towns, though, the ancestral Ploans left behind few clues about their departure. Instead, their mysterious abandonment remains deeply puzzling to historians and archaeologists alike. New archaeological technology continues offering fascinating insights. Ground-penetrating radar, laser scanning, and chemical analyses of soil and plant remains help scientists better understand the conditions these communities faced. Each new discovery paints a clear picture, but also deepens the intrigue surrounding their sudden disappearance. Archaeologists have also found tantalizing evidence in canyon paintings and petroglyphs, suggesting cultural practices and rituals that might have been tied to their migration or abandonment. Some symbols seem to hint at drought or famine. Others depict movement and migration. Could these images reflect the experiences and concerns of their artists, providing subtle clues to their ultimate fate? Yet, despite ongoing research, we still wonder, were these cliff cities simply abandoned due to environmental pressures? Or was there something deeper, perhaps intentional forgetting, driven by spiritual or cultural reasons? Perhaps the ancestral Ploans left their cliff cities behind intentionally, their motivations quietly fading from memory. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, ancient Greece witnessed its own civilization vanish suddenly, leaving behind mysteries, just as compelling. Hell might not be as famous as Athens or Sparta, but in ancient Greece, it was once a prosperous city thriving along the northern coast of the Peloponnesian Peninsula. Founded during the Minoan era, Hell grew into a vital economic hub, flourishing thanks to its strategic coastal location and fertile surrounding plains. Imagine a bustling city, its streets filled with merchants trading olive oil, wine, pottery, and goods from across the Mediterranean. For centuries, Helix served as an influential center of trade, politics, and religious worship, even becoming the primary worship site of Poseidon, god of the sea and earthquakes. Speaking of Poseidon, Helike was particularly known for its magnificent temple dedicated to him, considered one of the holiest sites in ancient Greece. It attracted pilgrims from across the region, enhancing the city's wealth and cultural status. Poseidon's presence seemed particularly fitting given Helike's proximity to the sea and its geological susceptibility to seismic activity. Perhaps a subtle irony given what was to come. In its heyday, Helike was more than just economically successful. It boasted impressive architecture featuring grand public buildings, elaborate temples, marketplaces, and residential quarters. Its residents enjoyed a prosperous lifestyle with well-maintained streets, fresh water from carefully constructed aqueducts, and a vibrant cultural scene. Artisans crafted beautiful pottery, and scholars contributed to philosophy, astronomy, and the arts. Helix's influence was significant enough that coins minted there traveled across the ancient Greek world, evidence of its strong trade connections and economic might. However, Hell's prosperity was overshadowed by its precarious geographical position. The city's closeness to seismic fault lines in the sea made it vulnerable to geological upheaval, a risk its inhabitants may have underestimated. In the winter of 373 BC, Hell's good fortune ran out spectacularly and tragically. Historical records, primarily from Greek historian Pausanias and other classical writers, vividly describe the catastrophic events of that night. It began with animals behaving strangely. Birds took flight en masse, and other creatures sought shelter in unusual places. Imagine residents puzzled by this peculiar behavior, perhaps shrugging it off, unaware of the disaster that would soon unfold. Then, without warning, the ground beneath Hell Lake began shaking violently. A massive earthquake rocked the city. Stone buildings crumbled instantly, streets cracked open, and people ran panicked into open spaces, desperately seeking safety. But Hell's tragedy didn't end there. Moments later, the sea receded rapidly, eerily exposing vast stretches of muddy seabed. Ancient coastal communities knew well the terrifying sign of an impending tsunami, but it's doubtful Helike's residents had sufficient time or opportunity to comprehend what was happening. Imagine a giant wave rapidly rising on the horizon, towering higher and closer with terrifying speed. The tsunami surged inland, flooding the city, sweeping away everything in its path. People, animals, buildings, leaving behind devastation and silence. Ancient texts describe Hell as being swallowed by the sea within hours, completely submerged beneath water and mud, vanishing almost overnight. Estimations vary, but it's likely thousands perished as Helike's population numbered at least several thousand at its peak. The suddenness and totality of the destruction meant few, if any, survivors remained to tell their story. Neighboring cities quickly sent rescue expeditions, but they arrived too late. Helike had vanished beneath floodwaters, leaving behind only a quiet lagoon where a thriving city once stood. What's particularly fascinating about Helike's demise is how well ancient records documented the tragedy. Greek historian Diodorus Siculus provided a vivid account, and later scholars like Pausanias traveled to the region recounting tales of the city disappearing beneath the waves. For centuries, Hell remained lost, evolving into a mythic cautionary tale. Another Atlantis-like story of a prosperous city destroyed by the gods or nature's fury. But even more intriguing is the fact that ancient warnings seem to predict Helix's destruction. Legend says that local priests and prophets had spoken of dire omens and warnings attributed to Poseidon, cautioning the city's leaders to appease the sea god. One ancient account claims Hike ignored a diplomatic delegation requesting sacred statues dedicated to Poseidon, a slight that was considered deeply disrespectful. The eerie timing of these warnings, combined with the tragic earthquake and tsunami, fueled later legends linking the city's demise directly to divine punishment. Was it simply coincidence? Or did ancient priests genuinely sense impending danger from the region's unstable geology? Hell's location remained uncertain for centuries, gradually becoming shrouded in myth and legend. Then modern archaeological efforts finally began to uncover clues beneath layers of sediment. Recent excavations near the Gulf of Corinth have uncovered tantalizing evidence of submerged buildings, streets, pottery, coins, and other artifacts consistent with ancient descriptions. Underwater archaeologists have mapped submerged ruins, finding walls and foundations beneath layers of mud, confirming that hell indeed vanished beneath a catastrophic tsunami. What's remarkable about Hell's archaeological discovery is the preservation of the submerged ruins. Buildings and streets covered by thick layers of mud and silt remained largely intact, preserving an incredible snapshot of the city's final moments. Archaeologists even uncovered pottery vessels still positioned exactly as they were at the moment disaster struck, suggesting the inhabitants had no time to react on. It's as though the city was frozen in time, capturing a chilling portrait of ancient daily life abruptly halted by calamity. These discoveries validate ancient accounts, offering rare concrete proof of historical descriptions. Yet, despite these finds, we still don't fully understand exactly how many perished, how many might have escaped, or precisely how long it took the city to disappear completely beneath the waves. While archaeological research continues, Hell remains partially shrouded in mystery, a poignant reminder of nature's devastating power. But the mind-blowing twist of Helix's story lies in its eerie similarity to Plato's famous Atlantis legend. Some historians speculate that Helix's sudden destruction influenced Plato's account of Atlantis, the legendary island civilization swallowed by the sea overnight, while Plato placed Atlantis far beyond the Pillars of Hercules. The destruction of Helen within his lifetime or close historical memory, likely influencing ancient stories and legends circulating through the Mediterranean world. This connection has sparked endless fascination and speculation. Could Helix's sudden catastrophic destruction have inspired ancient stories that evolved into the Atlantis legend? Was Plato unknowingly referencing Helix's fate as he described Atlantis' dramatic downfall? These questions remain intriguing to historians, fueling ongoing research into Helix's archaeological remains and historical accounts. The dramatic and sudden disappearance of Hell reminds us that history often carries hidden layers, waiting unseen beneath soil or water until researchers uncover them. It's a compelling reminder of how swiftly prosperous cities can vanish, leaving behind only legends, whispers, and scattered archaeological clues. While Helix was small, a larger civilization in Central America suffered a slower but equally mysterious collapse. When people think of the ancient Maya, what usually comes to mind are grand stone pyramids hidden within lush jungles, intricate hieroglyphs, and the mysterious calendar that once famously sparked old predictions. But beyond the popular imagery lies a civilization that was without question one of the most remarkable and advanced in human history, spanning modern-day Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador. The Mayan civilization thrived for over 2 millennia, reaching its peak during what's known as the Classic Period, roughly from 250 to 900 CE. Imagine dense tropical forests alive with sounds, birds calling, insects humming, and within these vibrant settings stood great stone cities, each a thriving city-state with its own king, temples, marketplaces, and residential areas. Some of the most famous Mayan cities include Tikal, Palenque, Capan, Chichen Itza, and Calakmul, each boasting grand plazas, enormous pyramids, detailed carvings, and impressive architectural achievements. These cities weren't isolated outposts. They were highly interconnected, exchanging goods, ideas, and culture across hundreds of miles through extensive trade networks. Mayan city-states were not just population centers. They were sophisticated hubs of learning, religion, and governance. Their hieroglyphic writing system, one of the most developed in ancient America, was used to record historical events, genealogies of rulers, mythology, and astronomical observations. Skilled scribes carved inscriptions onto stone monuments, pottery, and walls, preserving the stories of their civilization for generations. The Mayans developed complex mathematics and astronomy, famously using a base 20 numerical system and accurately charting celestial events, like eclipses and planetary movements. Their knowledge allowed them to create precise calendars predicting solar and lunar events centuries ahead, a remarkable feat that has fascinated modern scientists. Yet beyond their academic and scientific pursuits, Mayan daily life revolved around agriculture. They ingeniously transformed dense jungles and marshy areas into fertile farmlands through innovative methods such as raised fields, terracing on hillsides, and irrigation canals. These agricultural advancements supported large populations, feeding thriving urban centers and ensuring food security even during times of drought. Trade networks flourished as cities exchanged luxury goods, jade, obsidian, cacao beans. Yes, the original chocolate, feathers, textiles, and basic staples like maize, beans, and squash. Mayan culture was vibrant and diverse, filled with rituals and ceremonies dedicated to a pantheon of gods. They built massive temples and pyramid structures to honor these deities and religious. Rituals often involved elaborate dances, music, and sometimes human sacrifice to appease divine forces. Art was equally central with murals, pottery, sculptures, and jewelry showcasing their skill, creativity, and deep cultural expression. Yet at the height of their power, the Mayan civilization faced a series of mysterious challenges, resulting in one of history's most dramatic and puzzling declines. Starting around the late 8th century and intensifying through the 9th and 10th centuries, the great Mayan cities began to empty. Populations declined rapidly. Massive urban centers became deserted. Temples and palaces fell silent, and the vibrant trade routes ceased. So, what happened to cause this sudden and dramatic collapse? Archaeologists and historians have spent decades piecing together clues, uncovering layers of evidence suggesting that the collapse wasn't due to a single factor, but rather a complex combination of multiple interrelated events. Let's take a closer look at some of the leading theories. First, drought and climate change played a critical role. Scientific studies analyzing lake sediments, cave stalagmites, and soil samples from the region confirm severe and prolonged drought periods during the Maya collapse. For a civilization heavily reliant on agriculture and water management, a prolonged lack of rainfall would have been catastrophic. Imagine lush fields of maize drying up, rivers and reservoirs disappearing, leaving once prosperous cities hungry and desperate. These climate changes would have driven populations to abandon major cities, seeking refuge in areas with better water availability and food supplies. But drought alone might not fully explain the rapid decline. Internal social stresses, especially warfare and political unrest, also likely contributed. Mayan city-states frequently competed for dominance, leading to rivalries, conflicts, and power struggles. Archaeological evidence reveals fortified walls, defensive structures, and signs of battles increasing around the time of the collapse. Perhaps resource shortages exacerbated by drought intensified competition and violence, undermining social stability. Imagine a once thriving society torn apart by internal conflicts as each city fought desperately to secure dwindling resources. Overpopulation and environmental degradation were additional factors. As the Mayan civilization grew and urbanized, they placed increasing strain on the natural environment. Dense populations required extensive agriculture, deforestation, and water management infrastructure. Over centuries, intensive farming practices exhausted soils, disrupted natural ecosystems, and reduced productivity. Eventually, resources became insufficient to sustain large populations, triggering migrations, abandonment of cities, and rapid decline. However, recent archaeological discoveries have added fascinating layers to our understanding of the Mayan collapse. The introduction of LiDAR technology, light detection and ranging, an advanced laser mapping method, has allowed archaeologists to uncover previously unknown Mayan cities hidden beneath dense jungle canopies. In 2018, researchers used LiDAR to map the Guatemalan jungle, revealing an astonishing network of interconnected cities, roads, and agricultural terraces never seen before. These discoveries demonstrate that the Mayan civilization was even more extensive and densely than previously thought, highlighting the complexity and scale of their society. Excavations continue at these newly discovered sites, uncovering impressive stone temples, plazas, and residential areas, providing new insights into their culture and way of life. For example, researchers found extensive raised field agricultural systems, elaborate water reservoirs, and complex irrigation channels designed to manage water efficiently, evidence of their sophisticated adaptation to their environment. But these advancements also underline their vulnerability. When severe drought struck, these intricate systems may have collapsed rapidly, leaving entire cities without food or water. Moreover, the discovery of fortified sites and defensive structures through LiDAR suggests widespread social instability and conflict during the collapse. Mayan cities previously thought to have been peaceful now reveal evidence of walls, fortifications, and defensive positions, painting a clear picture of the intense rivalries and pressures facing these communities in their final decades. Yet, despite these remarkable discoveries, the exact details of the Mayan collapse remain somewhat elusive. While we understand drought, warfare, and environmental degradation contributed significantly, researchers still debate the precise sequence of events and interactions between these factors. Did climate change trigger internal conflicts, or did warfare exacerbate resource scarcity? Could it have been a combination of both spiraling rapidly out of control? Adding to the intrigue, there is evidence that not all Mayan communities disappeared completely. Some emigrated northward into regions like Yucatan, building new settlements such as Chichen Itza, or integrated with other cultures. Their descendants, the modern Maya, continue living throughout Central America today, preserving many cultural traditions, languages, and beliefs. Yet the grand urban civilization that constructed cities like Tikal and Palenque largely vanished, leaving only haunting ruins hidden within the jungles. One particularly intriguing puzzle remains. Could we still be missing a critical piece of the Mayan collapse? LiDAR continues uncovering new settlements, temples, and infrastructure buried beneath dense forests, suggesting we may have barely scratched the surface of what remains hidden. Archaeologists suspect future excavations could reveal even more extensive networks, inscriptions, or artifacts providing clues to the Mayan civilization's final days. Despite continuous research, the collapse of the Maya still captivates historians, archaeologists, and the public. Their civilization was an extraordinary blend of advanced science, agriculture, artistry, and religious complexity, far ahead of their contemporaries in many respects. Yet their sudden decline serves as a vivid reminder of how quickly even the most sophisticated societies can disappear under combined pressures of climate change, resource scarcity, and social conflict. Are we still missing a critical piece of the Mayan puzzle of what caused them to disappear so suddenly? We now move to Egypt, centuries after the pyramids were built, where another dynasty disappeared. When most people picture ancient Egypt, they think of the Great Pyramids, colossal statues, or mighty pharaohs ruling from lavish palaces along the Nile. But by the time we reach the Tmic dynasty, ancient Egypt had entered an entirely new era, one heavily influenced by Greek culture and politics. In 332 BC, Alexander the Great marched into Egypt, capturing the land without much resistance. Egyptians, weary of Persian rule, welcomed the charismatic conqueror, and Alexander quickly set about establishing his vision of a great empire stretching across continents. Little did he know, his short visit would reshape Egyptian history for centuries. After Alexander's death, his vast empire fractured, divided among his generals. Egypt fell under the rule of Tamisoter, one of Alexander's closest confidants. Ptolemy and his descendants, collectively known as the Ptolemaic dynasty, ruled Egypt from approximately 305 BC to 30 BC. Their reign was characterized by a unique blend of Egyptian traditions and Hellenistic culture. Alexandria, the city Alexander founded, became their vibrant capital, a thriving metropolis and intellectual hub known across the ancient world. The Ptolemies took a distinctive approach to governance. Instead of imposing purely Greek customs, they skillfully integrated their Macedonian Greek heritage with Egyptian traditions. This allowed them to maintain stability and legitimacy, keeping local populations loyal. Temples dedicated to Egyptian gods continued receiving royal support. Priests were given high status and traditional festivals were encouraged. Yet the ruling elite and many administrative officials were distinctly Greek. Greek became the administrative language, and Alexandria flourished as a cultural melting pot of Greek, Egyptian, and Mediterranean influences. Under the early Ptolemies, Egypt prospered economically and culturally. Alexandria grew into a beacon of learning and commerce. The famous Library of Alexandria attracted scholars from across the known world, becoming the center of academic life. Trade flourished, connecting Egypt with Rome, Greece, Persia, India, and even China through extensive trade networks. The Ptolemies invested heavily in infrastructure, building roads, harbors, and lighthouses. Most famously, the Lighthouse of Alexandria, one of the ancient wonders of the world. Yet, despite their impressive cultural and economic achievements, the Tmic dynasty was plagued by political instability, internal conflicts, and succession crises. The royal family became notorious for internal intrigues, scandals, and power struggles. Marriages between siblings, a common practice aimed at maintaining the purity of royal blood, resulted in intense rivalries and brutal power grabs. Think ancient soap opera plots. Siblings plotting against siblings, mysterious assassinations, secret alliances, and scandalous affairs. All against the glittering backdrop of Alexandria's palaces. The dynasty's later rulers became increasingly weakened by internal turmoil. Revolts erupted frequently among Egyptians, tired of Greek dominance and heavy taxation. This internal unrest weakened the kingdom. Infrastructure further from the city center, perhaps straining available resources. The complexity revealed by Lar indicates how deeply interconnected Ankar's infrastructure was and how vulnerable it might have been to disruptions. Yet, these findings also challenge some mainstream views of Ankar's collapse. Previously, historians assumed a relatively sudden abandonment due to catastrophic flooding or invasion. However, new evidence suggests a more gradual, complex decline. LiDAR reveals neighborhoods and communities outside the main city core remaining inhabited longer than previously believed, suggesting a slower demographic shift. Perhaps Angkor's collapse wasn't a single dramatic event, but a prolonged gradual process influenced by multiple factors: climate change, infrastructure degradation, political instability, and external threats, all converging over decades. Despite ongoing research, questions linger about the precise sequence of events and interactions among these various factors. Did drought or flooding initially trigger infrastructure collapse, creating instability that intensified political rivalries and external threats? Or did political tensions disrupt crucial infrastructure maintenance, leading to environmental vulnerabilities? The exact interplay remains uncertain, creating an intriguing historical puzzle. One particularly fascinating archaeological discovery at Angkor was the uncovering of sophisticated water diversion channels beneath the city's core, suggesting ancient engineers attempted desperate last-minute repairs to failing infrastructure. Imagine workers scrambling to reinforce reservoirs, redirect canals, and salvage crops amid rising chaos, revealing a final dramatic attempt at saving their city. Today, Angkor stands as one of Southeast Asia's most iconic archaeological sites. Visitors wander through massive stone temples overgrown by jungle trees, marveling at sculptures carved centuries ago. Angkor Wat alone attracts millions annually, but surrounding temple complexes like Angkor, Thom, Tapam, and Bayon offer equally stunning glimpses into the Khmer civilization's former glory. These majestic ruins wrapped by the jungle's embrace offer reminders of a once thriving empire that suddenly vanished. Modern research provides insights into Angkor's sophisticated infrastructure, extensive trade networks, religious beliefs, and cultural practices. Each new discovery helps historians reconstruct the Khmer Empire's rise and fall, offering fresh perspectives on their impressive achievements and sudden collapse. Ultimately, Angkor's mysterious collapse remains one of history's most captivating puzzles. Each new archaeological discovery raises intriguing questions about how such a mighty civilization could rapidly decline. Could modern societies learn from Angkor's vulnerability, or was its decline inevitable given its complex challenges? Throughout this journey, we've explored ancient civilizations that suddenly vanished, like Greenland's empty Viking towns, hell swallowed by a tsunami, and the bustling cities of the Maya abandoned in mystery. Each story showed us how quickly thriving societies could disappear, whether due to environmental disasters, shifting climates, or internal conflicts. Which civilization intrigued you the most? Share your favorite theories with us in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey into history's mysteries, hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. We've got plenty more fascinating stories on the way. Lost cities, archaeological secrets, and more captivating tales from the past. Thanks for watching, and as always, until next time, stay curious.